Do you have an elderly relative who has just been diagnosed with cancer? Are you caring for a frail parent or grandparent and find them quiet, irritable, or suddenly withdrawn? It is very possible that they are not only battling the disease, but also falling into a silent psychological journey that few people realize. Many of us focus too much on medication, follow-up appointments, or diet, but ignore an equally important factor: the emotional and psychological development of the patient after hearing the news of their cancer. Especially in the elderly, these changes are not always obvious. They may stubbornly refuse treatment, be uncooperative despite the family's best advice, or quietly fall into depression without anyone knowing. So, what are they really thinking, feeling, and needing? In this video, we will go through the 5 classic psychological stages that most older adults go through when faced with cancer: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But beyond the theory, you will learn how these stages manifest in older adults, and especially how you, the child, the caregiver, can recognize and accompany each of these stages properly. Watch until the end of the video, because understanding today can help your loved one live the coming days with less pain and more hope. Stage 1. Denial. There's nothing wrong with me. This is almost the first and most common reaction of older adults when receiving a cancer diagnosis. It's not because they don't understand what's happening, but because their brains and emotions are building up a defense mechanism to deal with the overwhelming shock. You may see them smile awkwardly, nod slightly when the doctor tells them about the test results, then turn to you and say, "That's what the doctor said. He must have been wrong. He'll be fine in a few days." Or someone will say bluntly, "What cancer? What cancer? I feel fine. No need for surgery." This reaction does not mean they are ignorant, but simply that they are feeling too stunned, too hard to believe that the disease they always thought was far away has now happened to them. In older people, denial is often deeper than in younger people, because for them, the concept of terminal illness not only evokes the fear of death, but also touches on a silent fear, becoming a burden to their children and grandchildren, losing independence, being completely dependent on others. A 75-year-old man in California, after hearing the doctor talk about colon cancer, was completely silent throughout the appointment. When he got home, he continued to water the plants, sweep the yard, acting as if nothing had happened. When his daughter mentioned treatment, he got angry. "Don't talk nonsense. I'm not sick." That reaction is not stubborn. It is the result of a very natural psychological defense system. If they haven't accepted the disease, it doesn't exist in their reality. The problem is, if relatives don't understand this stage, they are likely to fall into arguments and coercion, causing the elderly to withdraw further, to refuse to interact with medical information, and to delay treatment. So what to do? First, don't try to force the patient to accept immediately. Denial takes time to melt away, and that only happens when the elderly feel respected, trusted, and not treated like a child who doesn't understand things. Instead of saying, "You have to get treatment, you can't be so stubborn," say, "I understand this news is difficult to accept, but I'm here to help you slowly understand this." Instead of quoting test results, sit down with them and ask them what they are thinking and feeling. You may not get an immediate answer, but your patience will be a bridge to help them open up. Also, let the patient hear the information again from the doctor at the next visit, preferably with a clear and empathetic oncologist. In many cases, the patient needs to hear it several times, from different sources, before the mind begins to allow, to believe that the cancer is real, and from there move on to the next step. Finally, don't forget that in the denial stage, older people often don't want to feel weak. They still want to cook for themselves, walk for themselves, garden for themselves, because that's the only way left to prove, "I'm fine." Don't take away those small actions unless it's really dangerous. Consider it part of the mental recovery process. In short, the denial stage is not a barrier, but the first step that the patient's mind must go through to protect itself. The task of the loved one is not to break down that defense immediately, but to stand by gently, silently, until the patient is ready to step out of it. And when that happens, the patient will begin to listen, begin to ask, begin to want to understand. That is when we know they are ready to move on to the next stage. Stage 2, anger. Why me? when the shell of denial begins to peel away, when the elderly begin to admit to themselves that they are indeed facing cancer, anger is often the first emotion to rise. That is when the question, "Why me?" rings out repeatedly in their heads, even though they may not say it out loud. They begin to feel that life is unfair. Years of living moderately, sacrificing for their children and grandchildren, not smoking, not drinking, living a gentle life. And now they have cancer. They are filled with dissatisfaction, disappointment, and pain, but they express it as irritability. An 82-year-old woman in Oregon who had mild lung cancer yelled at the nurse when she was reminded to practice breathing properly. Before that, she had been polite, gentle, loved reading and taking care of her grandchildren. But after her diagnosis, she began to react angrily to every reminder, from doctors to her children. Many people don't understand, thinking that she is getting cranky with age or changing her personality. But the truth is, she is angry not because of other people, but because of the situation, because of the feeling of helplessness, and because of the fear of losing control completely. Angry older people are not like young people. They don't smash things or scream loudly. Instead, they vent their anger with bitter words, stubborn actions, or silent reproachful looks. They may refuse medication because they don't want to be dependent, or be grumpy with their children and grandchildren because they feel no one understands them. For caregivers, this can be the most exhausting and vulnerable stage. When you try to help, they push you away. When you show love, they respond with silence or anger. But this is the time when you need to be most alert, so as not to react with personal hurt. Because anger is the reaction of someone who is suffering from mental pain. And if you understand that, you will not get angry back, but will know how to create a space. Don't force the person to talk if they are upset. Be present, observe, and don't argue. If you are criticized, remember that they are not really angry with you. They are rebelling against a fate they do not want to accept. One effective way to do this is to evoke emotions through familiar things. Play a favorite song from their youth. Show them an old photo album, or ask them to tell a story about their past. When they are reconnected with something that is personally meaningful, the anger will subside. Some people also find it comforting to talk to someone who is not too close to them, like a doctor, nurse, volunteer, because they don't feel judged. Be flexible. If you can't be their listening ear, find someone who can. Most importantly, remember that anger is a positive sign. It shows that the person is starting to face reality. They are saying, "I know I am sick, and I am not happy about it." That is a significant step forward from the denial stage. And in that anger, if supported properly, they will gradually move from resistance to seeking answers. They will ask, "How long do I have? What should I do? Is there anything I can do?" Stage 3, bargaining. "If I do this, maybe I'll get better." After the anger subsides, older people enter the bargaining stage, a subtle, quiet, hopeful, and anxious stage. This is when they begin to seek mental deals with themselves, their doctors, their fate, and sometimes even their religious beliefs. They no longer deny that they have a disease, nor are they angry about it, but begin to think, maybe if I change my lifestyle, if I take my medication on time, if I pray every day, maybe things will get better. The bargaining stage often takes place silently, but it has a profound effect on behavior. Older people may suddenly change their habits, give up coffee after 40 years of drinking it every morning, start a vegetarian diet, or exercise more actively than ever. Not because someone is forcing them, but because they are secretly setting up conditions for life. They may say things like, "If the doctor says surgery, I agree, but will I be able to go home afterwards?" Or, "I will have treatment, but I want to go to church every Sunday." This is when they are trying to regain control. After being shocked by the diagnosis and caught up in negative emotions, they want to feel that they can still make choices, that they still have a say in their treatment journey. And that is completely reasonable. Older people do not need anyone to decide everything for them. They need to feel that their opinions still matter, that they are not considered patients who need to be obeyed, but individuals who are looking for a life path that is right for them. As a caregiver, this is the time when you need to listen more carefully than ever. If they say they want to change doctors, don't be quick to judge. If they ask to stop treatment for a few days to think about it, don't react negatively. Ask, why do you want that? What makes you feel uneasy? What are you most worried about right now? The answer will show you that behind that negotiation is not uncertainty, but a desire to live a meaningful life and take control of the rest of your journey. A 78-year-old man in Texas said after hearing the doctor say he had esophageal cancer, "If I agree to have surgery, I want the opportunity to visit the place where I was stationed when I was young." For him, the surgery was more than just a medical procedure. It was a condition to fulfill a last wish. His family initially objected, thinking it was childish, but after understanding, they helped him make it happen. And you know what? He agreed to treatment in better spirits than ever. The bargaining phase doesn't last long, but if left unchecked, the person can slip back into anger or depression because they feel they have no choice. So don't take small requests lightly. Don't ignore seemingly random statements. They may be trying to regain a little hope amid all the uncertainty. Accompany, don't control. Respect, don't impose. Because when older people feel they still have control, they are stronger, more cooperative, and ready to move on to the next phase, where they will face deeper sadness, but also need to be embraced with more understanding than ever. Stage 4, depression. I don't want to go on anymore. If the bargaining stage is the fragile hope that the elderly try to hold on to reassure themselves, then depression is when they give up. Not because there's no hope, but because the feeling of helplessness has become too great. This is a stage that many caregivers often mistake for normal sadness, or even think that it is a sign that the patient has accepted his fate. But in fact, depression is a particularly sensitive, vulnerable stage that requires deep care. The elderly at this time may begin to withdraw from communication, no longer excited to see their children and grandchildren, no longer interested in the news or old hobbies. An 80-year-old woman in Minnesota, after 3 months of treatment for pancreatic cancer, refused to eat, spoke less, and just lay still looking out the window. Her daughter said, "Mom no longer cries, no longer angry, but she is not Mom anymore." That is the manifestation of depression in the elderly. Not noisy, not chaotic, but quiet to the point of fear. They do not need many words of comfort. Even overly positive statements like, "Mom, be strong. Grandpa will be fine," can make them feel abandoned because no one really understands the depth of the emotions they are facing. In their minds at this time, there are very real questions. How long do I have to live? Am I becoming a burden? Am I still valuable lying in this place? They may start talking about death as a gentle thing, or sometimes outright say that they want to go peacefully. This is when the caregiver needs to be very alert, not to push away those feelings, but to allow the patient to experience them, but not be swallowed up by them. One of the most important things is presence. No need to say too much. Just be there, really present, holding their hand, listening to them, even sitting with them in silence. Sometimes, that is more valuable than 100 words of advice. If the person is no longer interested in eating, find a way to introduce food into the warm atmosphere instead of forcing it. If they don't want to talk, try writing a handwritten letter, or letting them listen to an old recording of a loved one's voice. Little things, but enough to rekindle the emotional connection that is cooled. Also, don't hesitate to seek professional help. Many people think that depression is a mental health issue, not a doctor's problem. But the truth is that depression in cancer patients, especially older people, can be effectively supported by a clinical psychologist, a palliative care specialist, or a mental health counselor at the hospital. When there is cooperation between family members and professional medical staff, the patient has a better chance of overcoming depression without having to suffer alone. And don't forget, this stage, although gloomy, is also a natural part of the journey to face cancer. Depression is not the end, but a quiet step to prepare for a deeper stage of acceptance. When patients have enough time, space, and understanding, they will gradually look back at their illness no longer with panic or sadness, but with a calmer eye. And that is the sign that they are approaching the final stage, acceptance. Stage 5, acceptance. I am ready to be at peace with this. Not everyone reaches the acceptance stage, and no one gets there easily. Only after going through denial, anger, hope, and disappointment and deep sadness can the elderly reach the point where they sit down truly to face the disease as part of the journey of life, no longer struggling, no longer trying to control, no longer asking the question, why me? The acceptance stage does not mean surrender. It does not mean giving up treatment or losing the will to live. On the contrary, this is the time when the patient, especially the elderly, has peace of mind. They no longer see cancer as an enemy that needs to be fought to the end, but see it as a final challenge to understand more about themselves, their families, and the meaning of the time they have left. An 84-year-old man in San Diego, after a long battle with prostate cancer, told his daughter, "I've lived a long, happy, and challenging life. Now I just want to have my grandchildren around me every day, a hot cup of tea, and the birds singing in the yard." That statement is not a surrender. It is a sign of the deep serenity that only those who have gone through enough pain can have. During the acceptance stage, patients can begin to actively reorganize their lives. They mention their will, tell their loved ones about their funeral, and share old stories they thought they had forgotten. Many call old friends, apologize for things that still linger, or thank those who have accompanied them in their lives. This is the time when they want to close the old chapters with completeness. For caregivers, this is the stage where you can slow down, no longer need to rush them to eat, no longer need to push them to fight like before. Instead, be present with serenity. Ask them what they want, who they want to see, what music they want to listen to, what books they want to read. Let them be themselves in the time they have left. Many seniors do not need new medications at this time. They need to feel like they can slow down, take a walk with their loved ones, see the sunlight through the window, touch the most familiar things like an old towel, an afternoon cup of tea. This is when the role of the caregiver is no longer that of a medical supporter, but a companion, walking with the patient, not leaving them alone on the final journey. If a loved one wants to talk about death, let them talk. Don't interrupt, don't say, don't think negatively. Because when they talk about death, they are looking for peace, not giving up. And sometimes, it is from that acceptance that the patient lives longer, lives lighter, lives more meaningfully. Don't be surprised if they start laughing more, sleeping better, maybe even joking about their illness. It's not because they're cured, but because it no longer controls their minds. Acceptance is the most beautiful destination on the spiritual journey when facing cancer, and not everyone can reach it. But with the right presence of loved ones, of unforced love, of sincere listening, the elderly will find their way to that peaceful land, where no matter what lies ahead, they will no longer be afraid. Cancer is not just a physical battle. For the elderly, it is also a challenging psychological journey that they have to face silently, sometimes without being able to speak. From denial, anger, bargaining, depression to acceptance, each step reflects a part of their deep inner selves, a struggle between fear, hope, letting go, and finding peace. And if you are a child, grandchild, or someone who is taking care of them every day, your role is not just to take care of their meals, sleep, or medicine. A bigger, quieter, but much more important role is to accompany them emotionally. Learn to recognize the small changes in their eyes, their words, their habits. Don't rush to reassure them, and don't try to be strong for them. Be present, listen. Allow them to be sad, weak, hopeful, and even have the right to choose how to live the rest of their lives. Because for the elderly, what they need most is not rational encouragement, but a hand to hold them for a long time, a look that understands them without asking. Please share this video with those who are caring for a loved one with cancer. Understanding is the greatest gift you can give. It costs nothing, but can completely change the rest of your loved one's journey.